Welcome to Registered, the podcast of the Catholic Register, where we'll be taking a look beyond the headlines of the stories that graced all of our platforms this past week. I'm Mickey Conlon, editor of the Register, alongside associate editor Quinton Amundson and reporter Luke Mandato. This week's episode is brought to you by Missions and Martyrs, the Catholic Register's new magazine celebrating 100 years of the Martyrs Shrine in Midland, Ontario. Go to CatholicRegister.org, Shrine 100, or call 1-855-441-4077, extension 1 to order your copy today. Welcome back, guys, after a 1 week hiatus due to the Canada Day holiday. I know you were probably both busy and glued to your televisions watching our soccer lads over that weekend as they made their heroic run to the round of 16 in the World Cup. You know, they're not in it anymore, too bad, but hey, what a run it was. And I'm sure I speak for both of you and most Canadians. These boys certainly did our nation proud. And we were quite happy to bring you a few stories surrounding team members with Catholic backgrounds. So hopefully, in the next 4 years, we'll be bringing you a whole bunch more of these stories as Canada climbs the ladder in the world soccer hierarchy and makes even greater strides at the next World Cup 4 years from now. But of course, it's not just soccer where we have Catholic school grads making a name for themselves on the world stage. This week's issue, we've seen a few stories about that. And Luke, this week you shared one of those stories with us about Ryan Nembhard. He's starring on the hard court in the NBA with the Dallas Mavericks. Ryan was one of 5 recipients of the York Catholic District School Board's Distinguished Alumni Award. Now, Luke, I know in your humility, you wouldn't embed yourself in the story, but you've got a little bit of a history on the playing field with Ryan and the Nembhard family. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, but also share some of the Catholic values that the York Board has recognized in Ryan Nembhard?
Yeah, thanks, Mickey. I'm not sure if it's humility or jealousy because that I didn't mention that, but we'll go with humility because it sounds a little bit better.
Okay.
But that's right. Yeah. So Ryan Nembhard, he's a point guard with the Dallas Mavericks. He's doing incredible things in the league, and his story begins back here in York region, as you mentioned, here in Aurora. I did grow up playing youth football with Ryan for a few seasons of house league, actually. My father was the coach, and he was one of those kids that, it's hard to remember so many years ago now. But he was one of those kids when I asked my father, as I was writing this article, do you remember Ryan Nembhard? And instantly, even so many years later, he was like, yeah, the star running back that, couldn't place a foot wrong on the field. And sure enough, that's exactly how I remembered him as well. He was the guy that was always at practice first. He was the guy that was running through the drills, faster than everyone else. His parents were always present. If anyone reads the article, you'll know how much of these work ethic was instilled by his parents. His father, Claude, ran basketball camps in the area that I had attended as a child. So it just goes to show some of the work ethic and motivation. When you look at players at the highest level, it usually starts very young, and that was the case with Ryan Nembhard. So, as you mentioned, Mickey, he was the recipient of the Distinguished Alumni Award. It's an award that the board gives out for people that have gone on to do excellent things, but still maintain some of those Catholic values in their day-to-day lives and in their professional lives. And Ryan Nembhard is just an exciting example of that. I think,
of course, he was one of 5 that received the award. Do you recall the other 4 people? I bet you do.
I do, yes. They also were able to recognize the furthest advancing Canadian in American Idol history. That's Nicolina Bozo. Dr. Amelia Ciofani is a cardiologist at Brampton Civic Hospital and St. Michael's Hospital. Father Alvin Joyce is an associate pastor of St. Clair of Assisi Parish down in Woodbridge, and Justice Linda Shin of the Ontario Superior Court. So lots of different areas. that the board was able to recognize. And that's usually the case most years, Mickey. They really highlight a wide range of people that from Catholic education have gone on to do some pretty great things.
Well, the good thing about that story is, I know we focused on Ryan Nembhard, of course, because he would be the most well known of the bunch. But of course, they show the Catholic values that our schools are trying to instill in our students. So and you really told it very well with Ryan and his family as a whole. So tell us just what some of the people were saying about Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely. So his story began at St. Jerome's Catholic Elementary in Aurora when he was in grade school, and it was his teacher that I spoke with, who was able to teach him both in the classroom and on the court, which was very interesting. And the number one thing that he had to say was not so much about his skills on the hardwood. That was kind of self-explanatory. I mean, we're talking about a guy that's playing with Klay Thompson and Cooper Flagg on the Dallas Mavericks. But what he was most impressed with was his, I guess you could say, humility, Mickey. He was someone that was with his brother, Andrew Nembhard, who's also playing in the NBA, I believe, for the Indiana Pacers. But he said those two were always, running drills for the girls team or staying, in from recess to help with coaching. They were following the coach's rules about not running the score up, showing humility and respect for the opponent. Even when other teams were forced into double and triple teaming him on the court, he was able to control his emotions. He was always respectful to players, other fellow coaches and referees. And just sort of that courage and perseverance are two of the biggest things that the coach wanted to share. And it's something that's paid dividends for Ryan later in his career. You can see now he ended up going to the prestigious Montverde Academy High School in Florida. He played for Gonzaga in the NCAA. I believe Gonzaga is Division I. And now he finds himself in the league. And that's just some of the things that the teacher said, that's not coincidence. And that's not purely skill and putting the ball in the hoop. That's who you are as a person. And he was always been very admirable of who Ryan Nembhard and his brother Andrew are as people, for sure.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the athletes get a bit of a bad rap from a lot of people saying, "Oh, these entitled and arrogant athletes and that." But I would think for the most part, Ryan Nembhard's story for the people that make it to the top, they're very much like Ryan and his brother Andrew. And that, it's just a lot of hard work that got them to where they are. So
absolutely. And we highlighted a little bit there in the story, Mickey, the Nembhard Family Foundation, charity founded by that family. They host youth basketball clinics and help provide athletic equipment to different neighborhoods across the GTA and in Indianapolis, where Andrew plays in the league. So it just goes to show you the family background. Another thing that the coach Reed had said is, his family, his father Claude and his mother were always present at his games. I know they were always present at the football field. They just had this really great sort of no nonsense upbringing that when you channel that with the athletic prowess that both of those boys had, it's no wonder to see, how far they've gone. So
yeah, good to hear. But you know what? These Catholic school grads, they're not just making a name for themselves in the sporting realm. Quinton, you shared the story. Actually, it was two stories this week about some of the music-making Catholics who have made their mark in sacred music. And it was a nice juxtaposition. We had a young fellow and a guy who's a little bit older, just a little bit older, but they both have the same goal of glorifying our Lord in song.
Yes, Henrik Zernfeld's high school days are quite behind him. He turned 100 years old on June 30th, but really young in spirit. And he has been singing since he was 14 years old, pretty continuously in choirs. Of course, he grew up in Croatia. He has Slovenian heritage, but ever since he came to Canada, he was one of the founding members of the Our Lady Help of Christians parish there, and he has just been stalwart for over 71 years in being a member of the choir. And remarkably, he thinks that he's singing the best he ever has right now because of his devotion to the rosary over the past couple of years. So perhaps praying to Mary has just brought more depth of feeling to his singing. And he, of course, did a little bit of singing for me during our call, and he sounds lovely. He definitely is very talented. And I think it's also because of his vitality. The story is not just about his obvious skill as a musician and as a singer, but it's just about a life well lived. Like, he devoted well over 15 years of his life as a caregiver for his late wife Frances, and he also has a very good exercise regimen. I understand he did hundreds of push-ups several times a week, and he did that up until he was 98 years old. So he is this very alert. So if you want to have the rubric on how to live a nice long life, Henrik Zernfeld seems to have it down pretty good.
I think you should be writing his autobiography after this.
Yes, we better get in on that. Yes. We had a nice long interview, and we did get into his past, including his journey to Canada. He came to Canada in 1948, wanting to flee from war-torn Europe after the Second World War, and he's worked so many different jobs, including the Canadian Pacific Railway, so a lot of experiences under his belt. And at the other end, Tate Pumphrey is kind of an old soul in a 28-year-old body, because he just has a love for traditionalism. He is bringing back square dances. He is maintaining pipe organs that are 150 years old, and he is writing classical music and sacred music that is appealing to Generation Z right now. We have done so many different stories, and other publications have as well, about how younger people are seeking the transcendent experiences in worship as a tonic for the chaos in the modern world. And this guy is just able to provide it. When, of course, he was in his earlier 20s, he had what he called the itch, like where he felt like, I have to compose every single day. But now, of course, he's going to be a father very shortly. So he only more so does work when he is commissioned to do so. But he just loves to be a composer. And he, of course, could play many instruments, including the fiddle, the guitar, the trombone for a time, and yes, the pipe organ. It is really cool to hear this young guy have a lot of passion, and I think we're going to just be very well suited having a guy like Tate Pumphrey, leading our musical charge here. He was featured on the EWTN 10-part documentary about Catholicism in Canada. That's kind of how I heard about him, and it's pretty cool that he's gotten a name for himself early on, but he also wants to do it with square dancing too. So a lot of good traditional aspects of our Catholic culture, this guy's trying to bring them back to the forefront.
Nice. So he's kind of assuming the torch from Hans Rico Zernfeld, right?
Yes.
So I love both those stories. Love both of them. So, but it's summer, and we're happy to bring some of those pursuits that are a little lighter side of the news. And I thank both of you guys for coming up with these stories this week. But we can't forget there is a big, serious world out there as well. Even if it is summer and things have slowed down, that would see us turn to our nation's capital. And while our MPs are out on the barbecue circuit, there's still a lot of news coming out of Ottawa that's affecting our faith. And one of these is a theme we've spoken about quite often since Registered's first day, and that would be some of the laws that this Liberal government is introducing that have some pretty big concerns for Catholics. Bill C9, of course, we've been talking about, pretty well every episode of Registered. That's the Combating Hate Bill, which is now in force. But it seems that was only the start, it seems. Quinton, there are a couple more bills to be voted on when Parliament returns on September 21st, I believe it is. That would be Bills 22 and 34. And you spoke to some people who fear the consequences for people of faith. What's the deal there?
Yeah, Bill C-22 is the Lawful Access Act, which really concerns the data and maybe the backdoor encryptions that law enforcement could have into our private communications, especially even when we want to use VPNs to sort of mask what we're doing online. A lot of these companies like NordVPN and Signal and Google and Meta, they're like, well, what you're asking us to do, that might very well cause us to break our privacy promises to our consumers, because we're supposed to give anonymity whenever we want to be able to use disguise our online traffic, because of course there's so many threats nowadays with people wanting to steal our data and that sort of stuff. But I mean, there's other, just the overall thing about the surveillance powers that could be given under this bill. And they kind of look at it like, well, increased surveillance and, maybe crack down on, certain things in the online space. Could there be a deleterious effect on, free speech? And,
So
there are people
how will
like,
that affect Catholics?
well, I
What are
mean,
these
of
people
course,
saying?
like with Catholic speech, it's been under threat. People have been looking at the fact that, Bill C-9 took away the hate protections. And then all of a sudden, if you take away Bill C-22, that provides more of a metric for, for that speech to, police to kind of do more investigative powers. And if the speech that you don't like, people could file complaints, for Bill C-34 for the social media platforms that host these speeches under the name of hoping to, do free speech. That could be, people could have hate charges against people that are espousing Catholic doctrine. And people point to the fact that there was a statement made by our Associate Minister of Culture, Mark Miller, who was, of course, the guy who was in charge of Bill C-9 a little bit earlier, that committee, saying that there are some verses in the Bible that could be considered hateful. And people are continuing to go back to that statement. It's like, wow, is this what our government feels here? And that's what the JCCF, the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, the people that are always on guard for freedom of religious expression and freedom of expression in general, they're like, well, this could not be a good situation, when there seems to be this crackdown across the internet, and now the number one protection for, religious speech, which was in Bill C-9, which was taken away from Bill C-9, is now gone. So it's just more the combination of these bills, the seemingly cracking down on internet speech, what it could represent. People are thinking that could really particularly hurt, Catholic speech. But there are people that say that, the other side of it, saying that we need to have a more safer internet because we are at risk and we are out of step with our geopolitical allies, and we are at risk of these very sophisticated criminal enterprises. So there are Catholic groups, there are, a lot of free speech groups like Campaign Life Coalition has spoken out. So many of the civil liberty groups are speaking out. They're just worried about how, pro-life and also religious freedom of speech could be caught up in this effort of wanting to reform the internet. And, people are concerned. And I have no doubt that when some of the politicians were in my city of Calgary at the Stampede barbecues and the Stampede breakfasts and all the stuff that they were doing in Calgary, that there are some current concerns there, because there have been a lot of petitions and a lot of concerns about where this could all lead. But it's uncertain.
And of course, we got to look
Yeah.
at Bill 334 too, and the social media ban on under 16s. And
Well, yeah, and there is certainly
we all know where that's going, because every kid that's under 16 will be able to get around that in about 2 seconds flat.
Oh,
So,
for sure. And I mean, as much as people want to, kind of do that, one of the situations I really couldn't get into the story is people are concerned about it because it infringes on parental rights. It's parents that should be really taking responsibility for their children to make sure that they're not being addicted to these machines. And of course, in our Catholic faith, it's all littered throughout about the importance of parental rights. But I mean, there are other people that say, including some school boards, like the Toronto Catholic District School Board, have been, very much trying to advocate against, social media usage in the classroom. There are people that say, well, if you don't have the state-driven response to reform social media from the hateful content that they could see, including stuff that could cause mental health issues, like especially suicidality and all sorts of other hateful content, well, then these social media giants aren't going to do it. And there's a school of thought where maybe there's a case there. So it's difficult. I mean, there's that internal tension between, civil liberties, freedom of speech, how much we want to maintain it, or do we want to leave ourselves in danger of some of these sophisticated threats that are online? So the security versus, civil liberties debate, it's raged on through a lot of legislative battles, and it's very close at the heart of Bill C-22 and C-34. And I think besides the MAID, what we're going to see about the MAID and possible stopping the expansion of that to individuals solely living with a mental illness, I think that these two bills are going to get a lot of heat coming up in September. But a lot of discussion is going to be sustained throughout the summer as well.
Okay, well, thank you for that. So, on that rather somber note, I think we're going to bring the Registered to a close for another week. We'd like to thank you guys for doing this with me. We'd also like to thank all you people that tune in, and remind you that you can turn to our website, catholicregister.org, for all your Catholic news over this summer. Reminder that we are only publishing every second week with the Register, which is something we do every summer. So we are putting an awful lot of stuff up on catholicregister.org. So tune in. There's still lots of news out there. And I'd also like to thank our sponsor, which again is ourselves, who put out the Missions and Martyrs magazine, which is celebrating 100 years of the Martyrs Shrine in Midland, Ontario. And you can also go to catholicregister.org, Shrine 100, to order a copy of that today. So thanks again to everyone, and I hope to see you all next week.